Disney has a peculiar habit of making characters disappear, not through magical spells or villain plots, but through something far more sinister: corporate editing decisions. Characters who were once central to stories simply vanish between concept and final product, leaving behind only traces for those who know where to look. And nowhere is this more evident than in the case of Mufasa's missing firstborn son. The Lion King stands as one of Disney's most beloved classics, yet beneath its polished surface lies evidence of a deliberately erased narrative thread. The signs are everywhere once you start looking: subtle inconsistencies in character behavior, unexplained gaps in family dynamics, and most tellingly, visual clues scattered throughout the film that suggest the royal family was once larger than what audiences were shown. Consider Mufasa's demeanor as a father. Watch his interactions with young Simba carefully, and something becomes immediately apparent. This is not the behavior of a first-time parent. Mufasa displays a level of confidence and practiced ease that speaks to prior experience. His teaching methods are too refined, his patience too measured, his responses to Simba's antics too knowing. First-time fathers, even fictional Lion Kings, typically show more uncertainty, more trial and error in their approach. Mufasa moves through fatherhood like someone who has walked this path before. The evidence becomes even more compelling when examining the Pride Rock family dynamics. Sarabi, too, demonstrates maternal instincts that seem unusually developed for someone supposedly experiencing motherhood for the first time. Her interactions with the other lionesses carry an undercurrent of shared experience that extends beyond simple pack behavior. There's a weight to her expressions, particularly in quieter moments, that suggests memories of previous cubs, previous joys, and perhaps previous losses. But the most intriguing clues lie in the visual storytelling itself. Early concept art from the Lion King's development phase reveals fascinating inconsistencies with the final product. Several pieces show Pride Rock configured differently, with additional spaces that seem designed for a larger royal family. More striking still are sketches that feature extra cubs and family groupings, cubs that never made it to the final animation. The architecture of Pride Rock itself tells a story. The royal den appears oversized for a family of 3, with alcoves and resting areas that seem purposeless given the film's family structure. These spaces suggest accommodation for additional family members who were later written out of the story. The pride's composition also raises questions. Why maintain such a large group of lionesses for what appears to be a relatively small royal family? Perhaps most revealing are the subtle animation choices throughout the film. In several wide shots of Pride Rock's inhabitants, there are gaps in the group formations that seem deliberately maintained, spaces where additional characters might once have been planned. The pride's positioning during ceremonial scenes creates visual imbalances that only make sense if missing elements were intended to fill those gaps. Scar's behavior patterns provide another layer of evidence. His contempt for Simba carries a specificity that suggests this isn't his first experience with royal rivalry. The calculated nature of his planning, the way he anticipates potential obstacles, and his familiarity with manipulating family dynamics all point to someone who has played this game before. His dialogue contains subtle references to past disappointments and lessons learned that seem to reference events not shown in the film. The hyena's relationship with Scar also hints at a deeper history. Their loyalty seems based on more than just promises of future rewards. There's an established trust that suggests previous collaboration. When Shenzi mentions that Scar has always been on our side, it implies a relationship that extends back further than the current plot against Mufasa. Most intriguingly, there are moments in the film where characters pause mid-sentence or exchange glances that suggest shared knowledge not available to the audience. These micro-expressions and hesitations create an undercurrent of untold history running beneath the surface narrative. They're the kind of details that emerge when a story has been edited down from a more complex original version. The timeline inconsistencies within The Lion King also support the missing heir theory. Certain character motivations and relationship dynamics make more sense when viewed through the lens of a previously established family tragedy. Mufasa's particular protectiveness of Simba while touching seems extreme for a normal father-son relationship, unless it's informed by the loss of a previous heir. These clues taken individually might be dismissed as overthinking or reading too much into artistic choices. But when examined collectively, they paint a picture of a story that was once more complex, more tragic, and more complete than what audiences ultimately received. The evidence suggests that Mufasa's family tree was deliberately pruned before the film's release, with an entire branch, and the dramatic possibilities it represented, left on the cutting room floor. The question becomes not whether Disney removed a character from the Lion King's narrative, but why they felt compelled to do so, and what that missing piece might have revealed about the true nature of the royal family's story. Understanding the true scope of what Disney erased requires examining the fundamental mechanics of royal succession in the Pride Lands. Unlike human monarchies with their complex inheritance laws, lion pride dynamics operate on simpler but more absolute principles. The strongest heir leads, but birth order still matters significantly when determining initial claim to power. This creates an immediate problem with the narrative as presented. If Simba is truly Mufasa's firstborn, then Scar's position as second in line makes perfect sense. But Scar's behavior throughout the film suggests someone who has watched this succession game play out before. Someone who has already experienced the frustration of being passed over not just once, but potentially multiple times. The evidence for this lies in Scar's strategic thinking. His plan to eliminate both Mufasa and Simba isn't the work of a novice conspirator. It's too sophisticated, too aware of potential complications. Scar anticipates problems that only someone with experience would consider. He knows exactly how to manipulate the hyenas, precisely when to strike, and most tellingly how to handle the political aftermath of regicide. This level of planning suggests someone who has spent considerable time studying royal transitions, possibly even participating in one before. Consider how Scar interacts with the concept of hereditary power. His famous "I'm surrounded by idiots" moment reveals frustration that goes deeper than current circumstances. There's a weariness to his villainy, a sense that he's been playing this role longer than the film's timeline suggests. When he tells young Simba about the elephant graveyard, his manipulation techniques are too refined, too practiced. First-time uncle figures don't typically display such sophisticated psychological manipulation skills. The pride's reaction to Scar's eventual rule also tells a story. The lioness's acceptance of his authority, while reluctant, suggests this isn't their first experience with unexpected succession changes. Their behavior implies familiarity with political upheaval within the royal family. They know how to survive leadership transitions, how to protect their cubs during unstable periods, and how to maintain pride cohesion despite personal reservations about their ruler. Sarabi's role becomes particularly fascinating when viewed through this lens. Her defiance of Scar carries the weight of someone who has seen royal authority abused before. Her specific criticisms, focusing on his failures as a leader rather than just mourning Mufasa, suggest comparative knowledge. She knows what effective royal leadership looks like because she's witnessed it through multiple transitions, not just Mufasa's reign. The mysterious absence of other adult males in the pride also supports the missing heir theory. Natural lion pride dynamics would typically include multiple adult males, especially in a territory as prosperous as the Pride Lands. The complete absence of other potential rivals suggests either systematic elimination or voluntary exile. Both scenarios that make more sense if there's a history of succession conflicts. Mufasa's teaching methodology with Simba reveals another crucial clue. His lessons aren't just wise, they're specifically designed to avoid previous mistakes. When he explains the circle of life, when he discusses the responsibilities of kingship, when he warns about the dangers beyond the Pride Lands, his instruction carries the specificity of someone addressing known problems rather than theoretical ones. His patience with Simba's rebelliousness seems informed by experience with how royal cubs develop, including perhaps one who didn't develop in the desired direction. The timing of certain events in the film also becomes suspicious under scrutiny. Simba's presentation ceremony occurs with a level of security and formality that seems excessive for a routine royal birth. The entire pride gathers. Rafiki performs elaborate rituals, and there's an underlying tension to the celebration that suggests this event carries more significance than a typical heir's birth. It feels like a do-over ceremony, a chance to get something right that previously went wrong. Scar's absence from this ceremony takes on new meaning in this context. While the film presents his non-attendance as typical bratty behavior, it might actually represent a calculated decision based on previous traumatic experience with royal presentations. If Scar witnessed the celebration of a previous heir who later disappeared or was eliminated, his cynicism about the ceremony makes perfect sense. The hyena's historical relationship with the royal family also suggests a more complex background. Their banishment from the Pride Lands seems to carry personal animosity that goes beyond simple territorial disputes. Shenzi's familiarity with royal family dynamics implies previous interaction with multiple royal family members, not just current ones. The hyenas know too much about internal pride politics for outsiders who have supposedly been excluded for years. Most compelling is the evidence hidden in plain sight. The pride's demographic composition doesn't match natural lion behavior patterns. The age gaps between pride members suggest missing generations or eliminated bloodlines. There are too few lions of certain ages, creating demographic holes that only make sense if significant pride members were removed from the population at specific points in recent history. The reaction of the pride animals to Simba's eventual return also carries undertones of previous experience with royal restoration. The celebration feels both joyous and relieved, as if the pride has been waiting not just for Mufasa's heir, but for the return of proper royal bloodline legitimacy that had been compromised before Simba's birth. These patterns paint a picture of a royal family with a more complex and tragic history than the simplified version audiences received. The evidence suggests that the Pride Lands have experienced succession crises before, that royal siblings have competed and possibly eliminated each other previously, and that Simba represents not just Mufasa's heir, but potentially the last hope for a bloodline that has already suffered significant losses. The missing pieces of this puzzle become clearer when examining not just what's present in the film, but what's conspicuously absent, and why Disney might have decided that some family secrets were too dark for their target audience. The most damning evidence for Mufasa's missing firstborn lies not in what we see, but in the psychological profile of Scar himself. This is not the behavior of a lion experiencing his first taste of sibling rivalry. This is someone carrying the weight of previous eliminations, someone whose hatred has been refined through practice. Scar's methodical approach to removing both Mufasa and Simba reveals expertise that can only come from experience. Consider the sophistication of his stamp EDE plan. He doesn't just arrange for an accident, he orchestrates a scenario that serves multiple purposes simultaneously. The plan eliminates his immediate rivals, provides political cover through apparent tragedy, and positions him as the natural successor without obvious culpability. This level of strategic thinking doesn't emerge overnight. More tellingly, Scar demonstrates intimate knowledge of how to exploit family trust. He knows exactly which emotional buttons to push with Simba, precisely how to manipulate Mufasa's protective instincts, and most remarkably, how to time his betrayal for maximum psychological impact. These skills suggest someone who has studied family dynamics extensively, possibly through previous manipulation of similar relationships. The moment when Scar lets Mufasa fall reveals the most crucial psychological evidence. Watch his expression carefully during those final seconds. There's no surprise in his eyes, no moment of moral struggle, no hesitation about the consequences. His response is practiced, almost routine. The famous "Long live the king." Delivery carries the confidence of someone who has spoken similar words before, possibly to another royal family member who trusted him completely. Scar's immediate response to Simba's trauma also demonstrates suspicious expertise in psychological manipulation. He doesn't fumble for words or improvise his guilt-inducing speech. He delivers it with the precision of someone who knows exactly how childhood trauma operates. His ability to convince Simba that the incident was his fault speaks to previous experience with gaslighting vulnerable family members. This isn't amateur manipulation. This is someone who has perfected techniques for destroying innocent minds. The hyena's relationship with Scar becomes far more sinister when viewed through this lens. Their loyalty isn't based solely on future promises. It's built on past services rendered. When Shenzi refers to their arrangement, she speaks with the familiarity of someone who has helped Scar eliminate problems before. The hyena's comfort with disposing of inconvenient royal family members suggests this isn't their first such assignment. Scar's knowledge of the Pride Land's political structure also indicates deeper involvement in royal affairs than his supposed outsider status would suggest. He understands succession protocols, knows which Pride members will support leadership changes, and anticipates exactly how the kingdom will respond to royal transition. This intimate knowledge of governmental mechanics suggests someone who has observed or participated in previous power transfers. Most revealing are the subtle references Scar makes throughout the film to lessons learned and past disappointments. When he mentions that life isn't fair, he speaks with the bitterness of someone who has watched fairness fail before. His cynicism about royal succession carries the specificity of personal experience, not theoretical resentment. These aren't the complaints of someone imagining injustice. They're the grievances of someone who has witnessed it repeatedly. The timing of Scar's plan also suggests previous experience with royal elimination. He knows exactly when the pride is most vulnerable, precisely how long he has before outside intervention might occur, and most importantly, how to manage the political aftermath of regicide. His smooth transition to power indicates familiarity with the administrative aspects of leadership change, knowledge that would be difficult to acquire without previous involvement in similar transitions. Scar's treatment of the lionesses during his reign reveals another disturbing pattern. His systematic breaking down of pride morale, his deliberate destruction of hunting patterns, and his calculated creation of scarcity all suggest someone who understands how to maintain control through psychological warfare. These techniques require refinement through practice. They're not instinctive behaviors, but learned skills. The specific way Scar handles dissent within the pride also points to previous experience with internal opposition. He knows exactly which lionesses might challenge his authority, precisely how to isolate potential rebel leaders, and most effectively, how to use fear to maintain compliance. His understanding of pride psychology runs too deep for someone who has only observed from the sidelines. Perhaps most chilling is Scar's apparent familiarity with covering up royal disappearances. His ability to control information flow about what happened to Mufasa and Simba, his skill at managing the pride's grief and suspicion, and his expertise in redirecting blame toward external threats all suggest someone who has managed similar cover-ups before. The smooth efficiency with which he eliminates questions about the missing royal family members speaks to practiced deception. The elephant graveyard becomes particularly significant in this context. Scar's intimate knowledge of this forbidden territory, his comfort in navigating its dangers, and his established relationship with its inhabitants suggest frequent visits over an extended period. This isn't casual familiarity. This is the knowledge of someone who has used this location for clandestine purposes before, possibly including the disposal of previous inconvenient family members. Scar's psychological profile reveals someone carrying the burden of multiple eliminations. His cynicism runs too deep, his manipulation skills are too refined, and his understanding of family trauma is too sophisticated for someone experiencing their first taste of fratricidal plotting. The evidence suggests that Mufasa's missing firstborn wasn't Scar's first victim, just his most significant one. This recontextualizes everything we know about Scar's motivations. His hatred of Mufasa isn't just about being second in line. It's about watching his brother rebuild what Scar had already destroyed, about seeing Mufasa find happiness despite previous family tragedies, about witnessing the continuation of a bloodline that Scar thought he had already ended. The missing heir represents not just Disney's editing decision, but evidence of a pattern of elimination that makes Scar one of the most successfully sinister villains in animation history. Someone who had already perfected his craft before the story even began. The deliberate removal of characters from Disney productions isn't unprecedented. It's standard operating procedure. What makes the missing heir case particularly fascinating is how thoroughly Disney managed to scrub almost all traces of this character from the final product, leaving behind only the psychological and narrative inconsistencies that sharp-eyed viewers can detect decades later. Disney's approach to character elimination during the early 1990s followed a predictable pattern. As projects moved through development phases, darker elements were systematically identified and removed to achieve the company's target demographic appeal. The Lion King underwent extensive revisions during its production cycle, with multiple story treatments reflecting increasingly family-friendly approaches to what began as a much more complex political drama. The shift becomes evident when examining the evolution of the film's central themes. Early development materials suggest The Lion King was initially conceived as a more mature exploration of political power, family betrayal, and the cost of leadership. The story's original scope included multiple generational conflicts, complex succession disputes, and a more realistic portrayal of how royal families actually maintain power. These elements were gradually simplified as the project moved toward mainstream family entertainment. The missing heir's removal likely occurred during what Disney internally called the accessibility review phase, a process where potentially disturbing or confusing narrative elements were identified and eliminated. A storyline involving the previous elimination of royal heirs would have raised uncomfortable questions about family violence, sibling rivalry taken to lethal extremes, and the psychological trauma associated with childhood loss. These themes, while dramatically compelling, didn't align with Disney's brand positioning for family-friendly entertainment. Marketing considerations played a crucial role in this editorial decision. Disney's merchandise strategy for The Lion King required clear, uncomplicated character relationships that could be easily explained on toy packaging and promotional materials. A royal family with a tragic history of missing or eliminated heirs would have complicated marketing messaging significantly. The simplified family structure, loving father, devoted mother, innocent son, evil uncle, created clean character archetypes that translated effectively across all commercial applications. The animation industry during this period operated under strict guidelines about content that could be psychologically disturbing to young viewers. The Motion Picture Association's rating system, while not directly applicable to animated features, influenced Disney's internal content standards. Storylines involving the elimination of children, even royal heirs, were considered potentially traumatic for target audiences, and were routinely eliminated during development. Comparison with other Disney properties reveals this pattern of heir elimination was not unique to The Lion King. The Little Mermaid originally included references to Ariel's deceased mother and additional sisters, who had been lost to various sea-related tragedies. Beauty and the Beast's early treatments included references to the Beast's siblings, who had also been cursed but hadn't survived the transformation. These darker family histories were systematically removed as projects moved toward final production. The corporate decision-making process behind these removals typically involved multiple departments. Story development teams would propose complex narratives, but marketing, merchandising, and distribution departments would identify elements that complicated commercial viability. Characters who couldn't be easily merchandised, storylines that required extensive explanation, or themes that might generate parental complaints were flagged for elimination. Disney's international distribution strategy also influenced these decisions. Complex family dynamics with tragic histories translated poorly across different cultural contexts. The simplified royal family structure in The Lion King's final version worked effectively in markets where audiences might not understand nuanced succession politics or where cultural sensitivities about family violence varied significantly. The technical animation considerations also supported character elimination. Each additional character required extensive animation resources, voice casting, and ongoing character development throughout the production process. Removing a character who appeared primarily in exposition or backstory sequences allowed animation teams to focus resources on characters who drove the primary narrative forward. Voice acting economics played a subtle but significant role in these decisions. Major characters required celebrity voice talent, which represented substantial budget commitments. Supporting characters like missing heirs might require expensive casting for relatively limited screen time. The cost-benefit analysis often favored eliminating characters who didn't provide sufficient narrative value to justify their production expenses. The focus group testing process during this era consistently favored simplified narratives over complex family histories. Test audiences, particularly parents with young children, responded more positively to straightforward character relationships they could easily explain to their kids. Complex backstories about missing or eliminated family members generated confusion and discomfort that negatively impacted overall audience response scores. Disney's legal department also influenced character elimination decisions. Storylines involving the elimination of royal heirs raised potential concerns about glorifying violence against children, even in fantasy contexts. While these concerns might seem excessive, Disney's legal strategy consistently favored removing potentially problematic content rather than risking future litigation or regulatory challenges. The artistic vision versus commercial viability tension reached its peak during The Lion King's development. Director and story teams reportedly fought to maintain darker, more complex narrative elements, while studio executives pushed for broader market appeal. The missing heirs elimination represented a compromise that satisfied commercial concerns while maintaining enough narrative complexity to create a compelling story. Archive materials from this period, while limited in public availability, suggest that character elimination decisions were documented through internal memos that outlined specific reasons for removal. These documents typically cited concerns about audience confusion, marketing complications, animation budget constraints, and potential ratings implications. The success of The Lion King's final version validated Disney's elimination strategy. The simplified family structure contributed to the film's universal appeal, commercial success, and cultural impact. However, the narrative inconsistencies created by removing the missing heir continue to generate fan theories and speculation decades later, suggesting that some traces of the original, more complex story continue to resonate with observant viewers. The missing heir represents more than just a deleted character. It's evidence of Disney's systematic approach to transforming complex narratives into commercially viable entertainment products, often at the cost of narrative coherence and emotional depth. The revelation of Mufasa's missing firstborn doesn't just add another character to the Lion King's family tree, it fundamentally transforms our understanding of every major theme, character motivation, and philosophical message within the entire franchise. What we thought we knew about the circle of life, royal responsibility, and family legacy becomes something far more complex and tragically beautiful when viewed through the lens of previous loss. Mufasa's entire character arc takes on profound new meaning when understood as the journey of a father rebuilding after devastating loss. His particular tenderness with Simba, his careful balance between protection and independence, his specific warnings about dangerous territories, all of these become the behaviors of someone determined not to repeat previous mistakes. Mufasa isn't just teaching Simba how to be king, he's teaching him how to survive the specific dangers that claimed his older brother. The famous circle of life philosophy itself becomes more poignant when considered as Mufasa's attempt to make sense of previous tragedy. His explanation that we are all connected in the great circle of life carries additional weight if it represents his way of processing the loss of his firstborn. The concept becomes not just a lesson about natural order, but a father's attempt to find meaning in senseless loss, to assure himself that his missing son continues to exist as part of something larger. Simba's exile and eventual return gain tremendous symbolic significance in this context. His journey isn't just about learning responsibility and overcoming guilt. It becomes about reclaiming a bloodline that was nearly extinguished. Simba's Hakuna Matata phase takes on new meaning as an unconscious echo of how his missing brother might have lived, had he survived and chosen freedom over royal duty. The parallel suggests that Simba's path toward maturity involves integrating both his missing brother's spirit of independence and his father's sense of responsibility. The psychological weight Simba carries throughout his exile becomes more understandable when viewed as inherited trauma. He's not just processing his own guilt about Mufasa's passing, but unconsciously carrying the burden of being the last surviving heir to a repeatedly targeted bloodline. His reluctance to return home makes perfect sense, if viewed through the lens of someone who instinctively understands that royal heirs in his family don't tend to survive long. Scar's ultimate defeat takes on additional layers of justice when considered as the conclusion of a pattern of elimination that extends beyond the events shown in the film. Simba's victory doesn't just restore the proper king to power. It finally breaks a cycle of fratricidal violence that has haunted the royal family for years. The hyena's elimination of Scar becomes poetic justice for someone who likely used them to eliminate previous royal family members. The sequel films and spin-off series gain new interpretive possibilities when viewed through this lens. The Lion King the Satsaku's focus on uniting divided prides takes on additional significance. If the outsiders represent not just Scar's followers, but possibly relatives or allies of previously eliminated royal family members, Kiara and Kovu's romance becomes symbolically powerful as the healing of generational trauma, the successful integration of bloodlines that were previously forced into conflict. The Lion Guard series, with its focus on protecting the Pride Lands from various threats, becomes more meaningful when understood as a response to previous security failures. Keon's special powers and his particular vigilance about family safety make more sense if the royal family has a history of being targeted by internal threats. The emphasis on teamwork and loyalty among the Guard members reflects lessons learned from previous betrayals within the royal circle. Rafiki's role throughout the franchise also gains additional depth when considered through this perspective. His mystical knowledge and his particular investment in royal family welfare suggest someone who has witnessed previous tragedies and is determined to prevent their repetition. His ability to communicate with royal spirits becomes more significant if there are more royal spirits to communicate with than audiences realized. The broader themes about responsibility, sacrifice, and leadership that run throughout the Lion King franchise become more complex when viewed against a backdrop of previous royal family tragedy. The pressure placed on royal heirs to fulfill their destiny carries additional weight if previous heirs failed to survive long enough to do so. The emphasis on breaking cycles of violence and hatred takes on new urgency if those cycles have already claimed royal family members. The missing heir's influence extends beyond narrative implications to fundamental questions about storytelling, corporate responsibility, and audience manipulation. If Disney deliberately removed a character whose existence would have enriched the story's emotional complexity, what does this say about the company's willingness to sacrifice artistic integrity for commercial viability? How many other beloved Disney films contain similar evidence of eliminated complexity? The pattern of character erasure evident in The Lion King's development process raises broader questions about how corporate entertainment shapes cultural narratives. When companies systematically remove darker, more complex elements from stories, they don't just simplify entertainment. They potentially impoverish our collective understanding of how families, power, and trauma actually operate in the real world. The missing heir represents more than just a deleted character. It's evidence of roads not taken, stories not told, and emotional depths not explored. The traces that remain in the final film serve as archaeological evidence of Disney's editorial decisions, reminders that even beloved classics carry the scars of corporate compromise. Perhaps most provocatively, the missing heir theory suggests that some of Disney's most treasured films may be incomplete versions of more complex stories. If The Lion King originally included a darker, more realistic portrayal of royal family dynamics, what other animated classics might be hiding similar evidence of eliminated complexity? The question becomes not just what Disney removed from The Lion King, but what else they might be hiding in plain sight across their entire catalog. How many other missing characters, eliminated storylines, and erased complexities lie buried beneath the polished surfaces of films we thought we knew completely? The missing heir of Pride Rock may be gone, but the questions his absence raises about storytelling, corporate control, and narrative authenticity continue to echo through every frame of the film that bears the traces of his existence. In the end, the most powerful stories might be the ones Disney decided we weren't ready to hear.